this piece is called Unconditional, and we were looking at the intersection between heroin use and unconditional love. And effectively, love just isn't always pretty, is it? Sometimes it's really difficult.
It's also really difficult to research love. So if you're a scientist and you're interested in addiction, the idea that how would you research unconditional love? So by working with a scientist, working with an artist, you can start to get at some of that. So, addiction basically is about the extremes of being human. And those things that can be quite difficult to get through a data set or an experiment. But I think all of us recognise a bit of addiction in ourselves. So when Teresa had this idea, unconditional, it just works on so many levels, because it's not just about the person taking the drug. It's about the people around them and their relationships, their relationship with the drug and their relationship with the people around them. And that's something which I just think is really difficult for us as scientists to get at, whereas you've had extraordinary explorations, I think, into it. So I think one of the amazing things about Teresa's residency for us has been that you've been incredibly prolific and made. This is one of many, many, many pieces that over the year Teresa's made, and there's been quite a lot of stealth art. So my MSc students have turned up in the classroom and Teresa has art bombed them with a performance piece. And you also did one, which unfortunately I missed in the department meeting, where you brought a colleague in, didn't you? Yeah.
I primarily do performance work myself as a performance artist, and then video and sound pieces, and it's always very site specific. So tonight this is actually a still from a film, and then you can hear people singing lullabies, which is a metaphor for love. But as Sally mentioned, I've done some performance pieces where people weren't expecting what happened, and one was a departmental lecture where people usually present their scientific papers, and I asked a performer who's actually trained in opera, who's like this nice middle-class older white man who looks like a kind of professor type, to start talking about addiction. Then I started playing lullabies in the back of the room, and then he started getting really upset and angry, and it was quite moving. Many of the PhD students were saying it just reminded us of the human element of what it is that we're trying to do.
And I think that's really important, because you can get quite desensitized when you're researching something, and in a way, it's a kind of defense mechanism against the horror of some of it, but actually you mustn't lose sight about what that means. And I was out for dinner on Friday night with a psychiatrist in the department who I haven't met before, who was telling me about that piece, and she said that she was moved to tears by it. And this is someone who all day, every day is doing this work with service users. But your piece hits something very special for her. So,
the question goes to both of you, but what was it like for you to work with an academic like Dr. Sally? How different? I mean, it's not every day that like an artist gets to collaborate with an academic.
Dr. Sally, I sound like Dr. Ruth. I quite like that. Oh, Dr. Sally.
Dr. Marlow, my colleague.
Dr. Sally, I like that.
I think there's kind of two levels. One was kind of what I expected, which was the institution provided so much support. They hooked me up with this group called AdFam, which is an organization that works with the families of people who are users. And Sally and I would often meet to discuss logistics and the science of, naloxone, which is the drug that I was very interested in, that is an antidote to overdose. But what I didn't expect was then we would just start having these fabulous conversations where we'd spark off of each other, and I always came out of those meetings with 1,000 new ideas.
As did I, but obviously I didn't go make art. They hopefully at some point feed into my work and how I do my work. It has been incredibly productive. Actually, it's been real.
And I think the boundary between scientists and artists became very blurred. Very blurred.
Yeah, and we're both trying to ask the same questions, effectively. So we're both saying, what is this thing, addiction? What is it about? And what does it do? What does it do to the person? And what does it do to the people around them? And then we just use different ways to kind of interrogate that. But I think what people forget is that scientists are inherently very curious creatures, as are artists. And people kind of know that about artists, but scientists are too. Fly the flag for the scientists here. And so to be involved in a project like this allows you to, allows that curiosity to go into different places, maybe.
And one last question. Will you be addicted to love?
Ooh, the jury's out. You can't if you're Robert Palmer. No, the jury is out on that. So we have a lot of evidence about drugs and certain behaviours. We've started looking, over decades actually, people have been looking at love and the idea of codependence, which doesn't have, it has to be said, an evidence base behind it. But when people who describe themselves as addicted to love talk about their relationship, they use the same sort of language as people who are addicted to substances. And very interestingly, people who are addicted to substances will say, alcohol is my best friend, and they have a one-to-one, they talk about it in a very relational sort of way. So I think that's a brilliant question, and maybe that's the sort of question that an art-science collaboration can solve, whereas an arts question, a science on its own maybe finds it more difficult to get its head round.
Maybe that should be our next project.
Maybe.
Oh,
You could work with us on that project.
Deeply philosophical questions, that's what we want to do.
that is the colour.
Yeah.
Yeah.